Hello, my name is Mark, and I live in Seattle, Washington. I've been a fan of Half-Life since its first inception so many years ago. I'm not an extremely avid video game player, nor have I been since childhood. I came from the Atari 2600 generation, and I'm still a lifetime adventure fanatic. How often can one really say that they are a square, and that very day they slew a giant duck with an arrow-shaped sword? I've played through Half-Life 2, Episode 1, several times now, and greatly enjoyed the commentary feature, which gives a solid glimpse at both the design and production process of the game, but more importantly to me, a notion of much of the thought process behind it, about which I'm exceedingly interested. You might find as I go along that I'm far more enamored with the Half-Life story than I am with the actual gameplay. I normally don't go in for science fiction, but something about Half-Life has always been rather gripping for me. Now, I come from a fine arts background, and indeed I do look at games like Half-Life 2 and Episode 1 as massive, multimedia, and completely interactive works of art. My intent with this presentation is, one, to simply show my appreciation for the enormous work that Valve has put into this highly enjoyable project, but also, two, to perhaps give you a perspective on the game that may be somewhat unique, as I'm not the usual target demographic for an FPS game. Whether or not my observations of any real value at all remains to be seen, but I will consider it a success if it simply makes you chuckle. So, I present to you my quote-unquote critique of Half-Life 2, Episode 1. I do so in a format very similar to your own in-game commentary mode, in the hopes that I can somehow show my enjoyment for how exceptional I thought this feature was for a video game. It was great to sort of, quote-unquote, wake up to Dog's big friendly face peeking through the rubble. Though it did leave me to wonder, why exactly did the Vortigons, after rescuing me, pile me underneath a large amount of bricks and broken pieces of concrete? And of course, Alex, delighted to see us, hugs and kisses. It's touching, especially her little moment of shyness, a little bit of embarrassment afterwards for her emotional outburst. Good to see that the gravity gun remained intact after the events at the end of Half-Life 2, and Dog wiggling excitedly like a little puppy. As you mentioned in the commentary, players indeed like Dog, and I can wholly understand why. He exhibits all the lovable qualities of a real canine, yet all the intelligence of a human, and he does so in a way that's both humorous and lighthearted, without being silly. What young man would not want a huge robotic dog to play with and to be protected by? I don't know any such person. Certainly not myself. If I had the means and the spare parts in my studio apartment, I would certainly build one. Here's my favorite Dog sequence, where he helps Alex get better radio reception for the communication device. He puts his arm up in the air and twists his hand back and forth like a radar aerial. I don't know, I just find that really endearing for some reason. One of the things that amazes me the most about Dog is that while he cannot speak and can only utter certain beeps and whoops, not unlike R2-D2 from Star Wars, he is still able to convey a large range of not only emotion but even basic communication through the use of just body language and facial expressions. Now, Dog's face appears to be constructed out of the remnants of a combine scanner, and the three flaps, I call them pedicles, nearly take the place of eyebrows on a human, and in conjunction with the aperture on his one red eye, are able to express a large amount of feeling. It couldn't have been easy work to animate Dog in such a way as to convey these feelings, and I wonder if during development you had an actual human actor who portrayed Dog and whose body movements were mimicked, or if Dog was simply animated entirely from scratch. Either way, it really is a job exceedingly well done, and it's wonderful to see Dog again in an active role, something that I would hope continues or even expands in Episode 2. The ledge sequence seems, of course, the logical progression for trying to re-enter the Citadel. As we know from Half-Life 2, the Citadel is surrounded by massive gatework and a nearly impassable gorge, connected to the mainland, as it were, by a few unreachable bridges and railroad trestles. Now, I'm personally not fond of heights, even in a video game, and the sheer drop along the ledge produces an enjoyable sensation of anxiety, which sounds like an oxymoron, but as you should all know better than most, is not. There's lots of little things to see along the way, like this old boot. There's also this ancient PC, which, while obviously old and cream-coloured, appears upon closer investigation to have a rather hefty PCI Express video card. Maybe. At the very beginning, before you even make your way to the ledge proper, is this bicycle, which was unfortunate enough to become impaled on this pole, and which anyone even remotely curious or impatient will try to remove. In fact, the first time I played through, I ignored Dr. Kleiner entirely in my efforts to remove the bicycle from the pole, and had to replay it in order to hear what he was saying about the reactor core. If you manage to not fall into the gorge, you then come to this rather open space. My initial feeling about this space was that it seemed kind of vaguely uncomfortable for me, to reasons I couldn't quite understand. As it played, it was obvious that the space provided certain functionality necessary to the forward progression of the game, such as making the player realize the almost incomprehensible scale of the Citadel itself, what disastrous condition it was now in since the portal explosion at the end of Half-Life 2, and also how the player was going to get back into the Citadel itself. I finally realized that what felt odd to me was that I lingered in this space for a significant amount of time, while being no help whatsoever in finding entry to the Citadel, and then simply being presented with the solution, as opposed to discovering it myself. Of course, none of this detracts from what actually does occur, which is that Dog puts you and Alex in the carcass of an old van with the Lambda logo on the back. It's a nice touch. And then he throws you into the Citadel. So, I mean, if I was just going to be given a solution, I don't think I could have asked for a better one. To satisfy my own curiosity, I tried to think of a couple different alternatives for entering the Citadel. But I did not have a great deal of luck, unfortunately. I thought that maybe the scout car would be a good way to get in, despite the fact that the scout car was taken by the Combine in Half-Life 2. I thought that perhaps I could jump over the gorge into that open area, like a doorway there in the Citadel. I realize the scout car only has the one seat, but Alex is rather tiny and would probably fit snugly between the back of the seat and the motor. Right, so I'm getting ready here, and here we go! Oh! Ooh! Crikey! Oh! Maybe that wasn't such a good idea after all. So then I thought, well, if that scout car can't make it, then perhaps the airboat might be worth a shot, because that, it's much more of a versatile vehicle, so, probably should have pointed it at the opening. But here we go, floating gently down into the gorge, and down the walls, and actually made a safe landing at the bottom, although, as it turns out, there's no way to get into the Citadel from down here at all. Just a lot of junk and fluff and dirt and no openings, and now there's no way to get back up. So, also not a very good solution on my part. Sometimes you just can't get a break. I felt that Combine architecture was one of the hallmarks of Half-Life 2, and I was very pleased to see this not only continued in Episode 1, but to see even more variations upon the general theme. Naturally, nowhere in the game is the Combine expression more apparent than the Citadel, with its almost ubiquitous palette of deep blue and violet and occasional browns, textures of unfinished metal and polished glass, its many obtuse angles and sharp edges, and almost complete absence of curved lines. The Citadel presents a look that is completely unique, alien, and terrifying. The place looks completely cold and brutal. Everything has this air of harshness and unquestioning utility about it. Many things about the Citadel indicate that making the interior spaces functional for bipedal humanoids was almost an afterthought. To me, the many stairs, walkways, railings, and bridges seem hastily or even poorly constructed. I don't know if this was an intentional design to further promote the idea of alienness, but to me it works very well and feels very legitimate. The light bridges and the use of the energy sockets, don't know the official term for those things. Well, I call them energy sockets. They were both wonderful additions and discoveries for Episode 1. In Half-Life 2 we saw many instances of the combined force fields, but to see them now, to see these same fields used in such a practical way was really delightful. We received only the briefest glimpses of Stalkers in Half-Life 2. I don't know whether I'm excited or horrified to see their roles expanded in Episode 1. I mean, to realize they were once human beings is a terrifying prospect. They're certainly a metaphor for the sheer, unfeeling, uncompromising brutality of the Combine, and they're an excellent catalyst to, I think, excite the player's outrage towards this enemy. They're such pathetic creatures, and nowhere, I think, is this more obvious than to glimpse them diligently but vainly attempting to maintain the shattered citadel. Perhaps the greatest role in Episode 1 is simply providing a visible, touchable, living contrast between the freedom being so desperately fought for and the defeat so nightmarishly feared. I don't know about anyone else, but when Alex sent me on the mission to retrieve a roller mine, and then I crawled through this passage, my first instinct was to take this destroyed scanner and then try to push the body of that dead stalker over the precipice there. And it takes a bit of doing, but you can get it. Oh, there he goes. And then, of course, throw the scanner in behind him as well. Despite the fact that there's obviously a button you push at this point to get access to the mines that are backed up in the tube, I remember being frustrated I couldn't grab these ones, which were obviously coming down through that tube and falling out through an opening in the bottom. I thought that was... it's like putting a cookie just out of reach. It took me a few replays to understand what Alex was saying right here, at the point where she mentions that the soldiers are too busy trying to escape the Citadel to worry about us. There's a big explosion. It makes it difficult to hear. But I got the gist of it. I think this is the first point where you really, really grasp how extremely dangerous it is, life-threatening in fact, to just be in the Citadel, where you have to make a dash across the bridge through this vortex without being vaporized. So of course you make a dash for it, then you turn around and you watch Alex do the same, and at first it looks like her timing is going to be a little bit off, but then she barely skims through, and of course we're delighted, everybody's happy to be alive. As soon as I turned the corner and saw the red light ahead, along with the sudden change in music and mood, I knew things were going to get pear-shaped really quickly, or at least had the feeling of that. I don't know what you call this area, but I refer to it as the advisor chamber. You can see the advisors, or perhaps the advisors' offspring's pods, down below in the depths of the chamber, and each one with the barely discernible Combine insignia on top of the pods. I'd just like to briefly mention a point of fascination I have with what I call the Combine corporate identity, and by that I specifically mean this logo. It's very abstract and resembles in style much of the Combine architecture. To me, the circle contained within the sharp-edged horseshoe shape suggests domination and control, or perhaps I'm just simply predisposed to think of that because of playing the game. It's funny, a general rule of thumb in graphic design, and specifically corporate logo design, is that the greater the client's budget and the more they can reproduce their logo in the media for market recognition, the more abstract you can allow the logo to become. In the case of the Combine, they have a rather large public relations budget, considering they now completely control all of the Earth's media. At this point we see Alex realizing that we have simply been watching a few hours old video of Dr. Breen speaking with the advisor at the end of Half-Life 2. Then of course the advisor itself, and I'm assuming this is like a genderless creature, realizes Alex has hacked into their mainframe and sees Gordon and Alex in the advisor chamber. Twice in Half-Life 2 we saw Dr. Breen talking to this ghastly lava-like being, and I was hoping so much in that game that we would learn more about what this creature was, what its origins were, its intent, purpose, or even what it was called. Of course, the best bit is right here when Alex taps the side of the pod and the creature inside launches its, what I can only call its acute neurological impairment attack, or ANIA, ANIA for short. Oh my god, it makes you wonder about the kind of world you're living in. I do hope to find out a lot more about these creatures in episode 2, and from what was said in the commentary, it seems like this may very well be the case. Well, I feel quite certain that I was not the only one who bounced off the walls and did cartwheels and jumped around the apartment with excitement over the hasty return of the blue gravity gun. Who can deny the desire for a device of such staggering power, lethality, and amusement? It's a real cultural icon. For instance, if you do a Yahoo internet search for blue gravity gun, you'll come up with nearly 1.2 million hits. On the other hand, if you do a web search for Sudan famine, you'll come up with less than 800,000. My, that really says something, doesn't it? Alex even seems quite excited at the prospect of Gordon having the blue gravity gun, and really, how could she not be? They are so outnumbered, and the task to stabilize the core at this point must seem so hopeless that the presence of the blue gravity gun must seem like a gift from above with its brutal, destructive power. I think the ability to not only destroy your enemies with what looks like a powerful electrical shock, knock them down and grab them from across the room, and then do horrible, humiliating things with their dead bodies, or even use their dead bodies as weapons. I think all of that appeals to something very primal deep down inside all of us. At least I sincerely hope that it's deep down. I felt that when the blue gravity gun was first acquired, it would have been the ideal occasion for Gordon to have a final epic showdown with the G-Man, which, as you can see here, he would shock repeatedly in the crotch area until he burst into flames, and then would carry away his carcass to use as a weapon against the Combine. But then I thought that that doesn't really contribute to the linearity of the story, so maybe that's not a good idea. So we make our way to the reactor core at long last. It's a relief, because the first time you play through it seems like it takes ages to get there. The core logo on the door looks vaguely like a cross between the international symbol for radiation and a swastika. Don't know if that was intended or not. There's a real sense of urgency as you approach the control room with the flashing red lights and alarms and the dead soldiers, and I wondered at first if there was going to be like a clock that I had to race in order to contain the reaction before it exploded and consumed City 17 in a hellish apocalypse, but I was glad to see that I could take my time shutting the thing down. Well, the shutters open, and then you're presented with your first view of the core, bathed in this brilliant, ethereal bluish light. The magnitude of both the reaction and the reactor chamber leave little doubt at this point that this is indeed the very heart of the Citadel. As you walk into the reactor chamber itself, I think you can't help but simply be overawed by what I feel is simply the most beautiful interior space in any of the Half-Life incarnations. The light is stunning, the Geiger counter crackles its disapproval, and the reaction pulsates to the perfectly composed music, which actually reminds me a bit of Brian Eno. It must have taken an enormous amount of effort to create this chamber, but the effect is really astonishing. A job very well done. In fact, it was a bit of a conundrum for me because I found it difficult to believe that the Combine could create something this beautiful. Right, I'm sure I'm not the only one who picks up the deceased stalker and fires them into the reaction to be vaporized. The shaft of energy and or light is just really stunning. People are like bowerbirds. They like things that are blue. I'm no exception. Actually, I guess that only applies to blue bowerbirds. Now, this was my favourite part of the direct intervention chapter. I mean, this where you have to scale the very edge of this sort of brace that the reaction has halfway melted away. It looks just bloody dangerous. I didn't know if I was going to be able to dash across it, or whether or not at the moment I got close to the reaction it was going to expand and get me, but we made it on the first try. Now this part, it took me a long time to figure out that I could use the hatch cover as a shield against these energy balls which are making their way down this shaft. I just assumed that the energy balls would knock the shield out of the gravity gun's grasp. Because I seem to recall in Half-Life 2, whenever you use the gravity gun to pick up an object and hold it as a shield against gunfire, it always seemed to knock the object right out of your hands, as it were. Now, taking into consideration that it was no simple duck-feeding session for Alex and Gordon to simply waltz into the reactor core and reactivate the containment field, I nonetheless wondered, what could we have done to make this even more thrilling? And I think really there's only one logical answer, and that would have been the presence of Dr. Kleiner. Alex herself stated that she hoped, quote-unquote, Dr. Kleiner is right about this. Well, if he had been there to begin with, we would not have had to hypothesize. Of course, as it often does, my imagination crashes and burns, and I fear that given Dr. Kleiner's age, and while he's still in the prime of his life, of course, by some standards, he's still no decathlete, I fear it would have been inevitable that he plunged to his doom, as the reactor chamber is, of course, a place with just too many opportunities to fall a very long ways down. I do have a great fondness for the character of Dr. Kleiner. He and I share a lot of similar characteristics, and in the end I could simply not place him in such a predicament with a good conscience. To imagine Gordon Freeman now without Alex Vance as his constant companion would be as difficult as imagining Frodo Baggins without Sam. Alright, maybe that's not the most accurate comparison, but it's the first one that came to mind. In episode 1 we seem to get a much deeper sense of Alex's personality and character, even if we don't learn much more about her life specifically. She certainly has a much deeper emotional range than in Half-Life 2, and some new abilities, such as fighting other NPCs, and converting roller mines for her own use, which, by the way, is a wonderful addition for many other reasons besides watching two mines go at it is like playing Rock'em Sock'em Robots, except instead of boxing, and instead of being robots, the roller mines, and they're shocking each other. Actually, I guess that's nothing like Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Anyway, both of these things obviously due in no small part to the improvements in AI and animation. In Half-Life 2, there were several instances where Gordon had to protect Alex or provide cover while she performed some task, and it's good to see this role reversed in Episode 1, such as the part where she provides cover with the rifle while you make your way through hordes of antlions and zombies and then finally assault the gate to the Combine garrison. Also, I feel quite sure that I'm not the only one to be dismayed to have the Combine sniper rifle so tantalizingly close, yet still so completely unusable. I really hope that in Episode 2 we'll have access to this weapon. I mean, it has a blue laser, for pity's sake. How can you deny the consumer something that great? Alex has a much more casual sense of humor now, as indicated by her anecdote and later wisecracks about Gordon's frequent air vent exploration, and also her remarks about the disgusting water, and also her making zombie noises when Gordon's flashlight goes out. Humor, I think, it's an excellent way to create much more of a binding, quote-unquote friendship between the player and the character. And of course the scene where Alex says goodbye to Gordon yet again touches the glass on the lift before he goes to his possible death in the reactor chamber of the Citadel. Of course it's very, very touching. Almost a repeat of the same instance in Half-Life 2. The scene in the Stalker train car was really a turning point in the player's relationship with Alex's character. Up until this point, Alex, while certainly expressing some emotion, was still a very steady and stalwart personality, strong, tough, even a little bit cocky, and able to endure frequent hardship with a light heart and even a sense of humor. I think this was probably most players' general impression of Alex. And to have that view shattered by the discovery of the stalkers on the train, and then the subsequent crash where Alex is pinned beneath, briefly, one of the screaming creatures, it's really quite disturbing and disorienting. Given the events of Half-Life 2, it's entirely conceivable to imagine that Alex has gone through an enormous amount of stress and sleep deprivation for days and has been driven to this emotional breaking point. She's obviously extremely upset by this incident, and it's frustrating as a player that there's nothing you can do to give her any consolation. All you can do is approach her and repeatedly press the use key, and given how moving a sequence this was, I'm willing to bet that I was not the only one who exhibited this specific response. I was very happy to see that Dr. Mossman escaped Half-Life 2 mostly unscathed, not just because she's an integral part of the Resistance team, but also because she's quite lovely, and I do have quite a liking for her. She has quite a lot of weaknesses, as we all do, but a lot of strengths as well to counterbalance them, and I can relate to that to a great extent. I think a mission in Episode 2 to rescue Dr. Mossman from the terrible clutches of the Combine would be a fine thing. And my, she's looking rather lovely in a winter parka. Well, that's pathetic, I know, but you know what? Reminding me of that fact, it's not going to help anyone, least of all Dr. Mossman. When I first played Episode 1, I held my breath for the appearance of some new horrifying creature, and I was definitely not let down. Actually, I suppose there are two completely new creatures, though the mini Strider makes such a brief appearance that it's really only a preview of what's to come in Episode 2. Everything about the Zombine is wonderful and wonderfully annoying. I remember wondering in Half-Life 2 why the police and soldiers never seemed to be supplanted by the nefarious headcrabs. At this point right here, I really wish I had something like a stick, because the overwhelming urge is to poke the dead Zombine in the eye, or at least vaguely where the eye would normally be. It seems that in the case of the Zombines, the Combine soldier still has some measure of control over the nervous system, much more so than when normal humans host the headcrab. For instance, the fact that they will pull a live grenade out would seem to indicate that the soldier portion is either trying to end its own pitiful existence, attack its enemies, or perhaps both. It doesn't make sense that the headcrab in charge would whip out a grenade. Its electronic utterances seem to belie a certain amount of still rational thought. It's difficult to tell what they're saying, but I seem to hear things like secondary infestation, necrotic, and area not secure. My favourite thing about the Zombines is, of course, their movement. Their gait is really what you'd expect from a former human who is now under the partial control of a parasite. That is, they legitimately look neurologically impaired, as if they had muscular dystrophy or multiple sclerosis or something. As with Dog, my instincts tell me that you simply must have had a human actor whose movements were traced for animating this character. Until they see an enemy, they seem to ramble about incoherently and randomly bumping into objects and each other. Then, of course, as soon as they spot their prey, they suddenly lope forward with all the grace of a slinky falling down a flight of stairs. Yet even still, sometimes they'll pause, as if midway through their charge they suddenly forgot what they were doing. It's really, really quite beautiful. The sequences of complete darkness that occur during Alex and Gordon's escape from the crashed train to the surface streets was something completely different from Half-Life 2 and totally unexpected. It creates a very real sense of claustrophobia for the player. And as mentioned in your commentary, the complete darkness does indeed force the player to continually reassess and make more efficient the meager resources of light that are available, such as Gordon's wavering flashlight, which Alex does not seem particularly fond of having shown in her face. Flares, which we saw in Half-Life 2, being used by the Combine, but now we can use ourselves, thankfully, not only to provide light, but also to set zombies on fire. And, of course, flaming zombies, which are much better than non-flaming zombies for emitting light. No, I'm no endocrinologist, and I can't possibly guess at the mysteries of zombie metabolism that must be occurring to make them so highly combustible, but, thank God for small favours. The climactic, frantic zombie battle that occurs while waiting for the lift to arrive is certainly a lesson in anxiety and panic. I can't claim that it didn't make my heart race and my palms sweat. The best approach seems to be to back yourself against a wall. That way at least the zombies only continually come at you from only about 180 degrees, more or less. You have a lot on your plate, as it were, continually checking to see if the lift has arrived, making sure Alex is not overwhelmed, trying to destroy the zombies themselves, or light them on fire to provide light, lighting new flares as the old ones burn out, and trying not to lose your sense of direction and become disoriented and run off in the wrong direction. It all reaches a crescendo as the lift finally appears and a handful of shrieking, fast zombies slam into you. And then the best bit of all is the final ride to the surface. It's like ascending through the different levels of Dante's Inferno. Every level has some brand new horde to witness, like catching brief glimpses of Hieronymus Bosch paintings. The antlion dragging the body away. The zombie banging on the gates. It's very priceless. City 17 reminds me very much of a much more destroyed version of many parts of Prague in the Czech Republic. Of course, I guess that's not at all surprising, I suppose, since it seems that this is exactly the look that was trying to be achieved, that of an Eastern European city in a possibly former Soviet satellite state. The parts of the city that we traverse in Episode 1, however, seem to be in a somewhat more residential area than in Half-Life 2. With more housing, fewer public buildings, save the hospital here of course, and almost no examples of the sort of Victorian-era, turn-of-the-century style architecture like we saw in much of City 17 and Half-Life 2. To me this change creates a definitely different sort of mood. It somehow seems a bit drier and much more desperate, which may of course not be entirely due to the architecture but also to the story at this point, as we are trying to escape the city as quickly as possible. As in Half-Life 2, I'm very much intrigued by the remnants of what remain of the pre-Combine invasion city and world in general. In this case, the telephones, whose wires have simply been cut and the loose receivers have been left to hang on the phone, perhaps deliberately, almost in a mockery of the world it once was. The graffiti found throughout Half-Life 2, not only in City 17 but everywhere really, and now in Episode 1, which itself has some new additions, has always been a point of fascination for me. It looks completely legitimate, as if you actually hired some professional taggers to create it. Some graffiti uses the Roman alphabet, while other uses some Cyrillic characters, which indicates to me that some of it was from before the Combine and some of it after. There are also the myriad posters, some very old, some very new, some pre-Combine, and some actually Combine propaganda. Much of the graffiti gives subtle hints as to what has occurred during the last 10 years of the Half-Life story, and some of it is obviously has meanings only, I suppose, to the Valve artists who created it. However, all of it, I think more than anything else in the game, gives a very clear sense of the society and the history of the former world that's now lost. I was delighted to rise out of the zombie-infested train station and see Dr. Kleiner on the public address system. As I stated previously, I do find the story of the game much more gripping than the actual gameplay, and to be able to have a rest while hearing Dr. Kleiner summarize what's been going on since the end of Half-Life 2 was really a wonderful part of the game. Hearing him describe in dry scientific detail that people will now become pregnant from sex is of course amusing, and also his unending devotion to his head crab, Lamar, is always is always touching. To find that antlions and antlion guards have found their way into the city is a very good suggestion as to just how pear-shaped things have really become in City 17. I personally did not think it was possible for antlions to become even more annoying than they were in Half-Life 2, but boy was I wrong. Having to plug up the burrows is a great addition to the game, and thankfully at least it does indeed stop them for a bit, unlike the never-ending spawn of these creatures that came up out of the sand in the Highway 17 and Sandtrap chapters of Half-Life 2. What I find highly amusing is that if you try to plug up the burrow just before destroying the Antlion guard, it will come over and try to unplug it, and usually succeed. I suppose now we truly know why they're called Antlion guards. I really wish we could learn more about the life cycle of the antlion species, and especially the relationship between the antlions and the larger guards. But I guess this is more of a game, really, than a nature documentary. Pity I'll have to resort to using my imagination. Again. The safe house is really one of my favourite parts of the entire game. It comes at the end of a rather lengthy fight against Combine soldiers and antlions, and it again gives us a chance to sort of rest and gather information. I always enjoy talking, to the citizens, and of course peculiar or even paranoid observations are almost nearly always worth at least a smile. The first time I played and entered the safe house, I really was hoping to have a bit more interaction with the characters inside than was actually the case. However, I realized that this would, add a lot of hesitation and complexity to the game when probably not really necessary. And the majority of players, I think, want action, perhaps, as opposed to non-combat interaction. The whinging couple that you hear and see through the floorboards is really one of the most delightful little discoveries of the game. It's really quite a clever and unique addition. In fact, it nearly feels like an intrusion into the game, given its peculiarity, albeit a good intrusion. I think what makes it so entertaining, of course, is that while the destruction of the Combine portal has really only been a few hours beforehand, this couple is already moaning about the desperate state of affairs that have come as a result. One of their best lines is the man says that they're all starving and Dr. Kleiner's crab is probably eating grade A head. He's like, they're already suspicious of the new supposed leaders. I think their almost instantaneous doubt, paranoia, and cynicism following the collapse of the portal is really sort of a satire on our own political times. I was definitely amused by both Alex's and the couple's reference to Colonel Cubbage, who was certainly a singularly peculiar character to encounter in Half-Life 2, and why, I might ask at this point, was the only English person in the game made out to be such a twit. At the point he was mentioned, I was really hoping that Cubbage would burst through the door like the Kool-Aid Man with a Lee Enfield rifle in his hands and shout out something like, "Alex Vance? Dr. Freeman? Hurry! The Combine are about to launch a massive assault against the safe house. Take these resistance members outside to the street and form a British infantry square to beat off their attack. I'll stay inside here and cover the exits." But then I realised I'm probably the only Episode 1 player who would have thought that a British infantry square was funny. Barney is really looking rather green around the gills in Episode 1, you might say. Who can blame him, really? He has a lot on his mind, practically leading the resistance in City 17, losing his job with the filth, or rather the police, I should say, continually trying to protect Dr. Kleiner, making sure Gordon is shuffled along through all of the right places, and now, at the crescendo of City 17's desperate final stroke against the Combine, he has to arrange the immediate evacuation of as many citizens as possible before they're vaporized by some kind of fusion reaction. Now, like Alex, he's gone for some time, obviously, without sleep, but while Alex and Gordon had the luxury of passing through a veritable time warp, Barney has been stuck for an extra week in City 17 fighting the Combine. So given the severe disarrangement of his hair and the growth of stubble on his face, it's likely to conclude that he has gone 10 days or more since he pulled off that filthy uniform and had a shower. Taking all of these things into consideration, I suppose it's really no surprise that he's emotionally on edge, a little bit irritable and a little bit short-tempered. But despite all of this, it's still Barney Calhoun, and his sense of humour still manages to shine through, even in the worst of circumstances, such as his crack to Gordon about his limited supply of crowbars, and his rather surprising and openly flirtatious remarks about Gordon and Alex. It's good to see in the end that Barney does indeed make it onto the second-to-last train out of Dodge, thereby securing a place in Episode 2, and hopefully, for his sake, a shower, a rest, and a nice cup of tea. it would do him a world of good, I think. Now, in my real life, I work in a hospital part-time. I have for over 10 years, so you can imagine my delight upon discovering that one of the game's major zombie battles occurs in a hospital, despite the fact that the one where I work is more like 50s and 60s architecture as opposed to this more turn-of-the-century institutional sanatorium-styled layout. The hospital in Episode 1, with its yellowish light, barred windows, great archways, and lots of sort of sandstone walls, it reminds me a great deal of Van Gogh's paintings that he did during his institutionalization. It feels like the sort of place you would end up if you had tuberculosis. You might have noticed by now that the shotgun shells I'm using are packed with birdshot as opposed to buckshot. Cheating? Possibly. Entertaining? Definitely. I'll use 75 pellets per shotgun round with a damage of 1 point per pellet. It seems to do the job rather well, with the pleasant side effect of it creating a simply horrible and beautiful mess on the wall. Every blast of a shotgun creates a new impressionist work of art on the pockmarked plaster. Zombies, headcrabs and outlines, especially with their sort of iridescent yellow, gold and red splatterings, really create just a bloody mess. While buckshot, of course, is the universal shot size for combat applications, I think that some ground must be given up in the name of aesthetics. If your graphics accelerator can handle it, I highly recommend using the birdshot. This is one of my favourite parts when you walk through the operating room and then you see the bits blown past you through the open doorway. There's like a leg, an arm and a torso, probably. While some of this 3.5 to 4 minute long zombie battle in the hospital is obviously scripted, most of it appears to be completely random, and every time you play through it, it's slightly different. But also, every time it's played through, the scripted portions blend seamlessly with the random events to create what appears every single time to be an extremely well choreographed event. From the way Alex handles her shotgun and attacks the enemies, to the way the remaining Combine soldiers move about, to the direction the zombies knock debris around, all of it seems to be perfectly planned. I'm amazed every time I play through this sequence, which is without a doubt my favourite part of the game. This part is great, with the 4 zombies lingering in the lounge like family members waiting for news of a loved one's surgery. Then, of course, the zombies banging on the glass from inside the treatment room is always hilarious to me. I just find something extremely funny about them banging on things, trying to get at you, as they do indeed want at you very badly, but simply are not smart enough to be able to figure out how to use door latches, etc., and then resort simply to banging on the barrier in an attempt to get it out of the way. Now, I know that in the commentary it was stated that most players could not resist opening the door of that room and letting the zombies out. However, I never even realised you could open it on your own until hearing the commentary. I guess it just never occurred to me to try and do that. I guess maybe I simply have a much more inbred fear of zombies in hospitals than most people, since in real life the threat of zombies in a hospital is much more real to me than the average person. The humanitarian mission, and I know that term sounds dreadfully political, of escorting the citizens to the train station and thereby to freedom is, I felt, one of the highest points of Episode 1. While in Half-Life 2 we certainly rescued a couple of people, or rather Barney set them free from behind the force field, and we had squads of rather mediocre resistance members often following us around and providing a little extra gunfire, I felt that the escort of these people to the trains was something wholly and remarkably different. I wish there had been some more character interaction, however, and the deadly desperation of the situation had been made to feel much clearer. I wonder if in situations like this you wanted to make it a much more emotionally volatile encounter for the player, yet were still required to find a balance between entertaining gameplay as opposed to disturbing gameplay and storytelling. I think I'm more critical about the final showdown with the Strider than I am about anything else in the game. It worked well, mind you, and it was enjoyable, of course, trying to find the path through the shipping containers all the while dodging the Horde Strider's fire. But still, to me, I'm afraid it also felt rather predictable and empty to have this sort of, quote-unquote boss battle be the final major confrontation of the game. What I found myself wishing is that we had been able to pile on the last train with Barney and the last of the evacuees while dodging gunfire from Combine soldiers who would pour into the train station just as we slid away. I'm always a fan of the completely unexpected, and it just did not feel that the Strider was unexpected. However, that definitely does not detract from the satisfaction derived from destroying that bastard. However, as I like to do, I leave on a good note. I'm not quite sure what I can possibly say to further complement the final sequence as Alex and Gordon ride away on the back of the last train out. Taking into consideration that I've not seen an enormous amount of video games, I still wholeheartedly endorse the final scene here as being one of the most stunning and visually stirring sequences in a game. More stirring even than Mario's joyful reunion with Princess Toadstool, and I feel it's a fantastic conclusion to Episode 1. So I hope you've enjoyed my little presentation at least as much as I've enjoyed creating it, or failing that, I hope you at least were not frightened by it or insulted by it. You've outdone yourselves, Valve. Jolly good show. So keep up the good work, and I'll be looking forward to Episode 2.